Good morning. Nice to see everyone here today. Welcome to our November Tempe History Society Lunch Talks, which of course we're streaming over Facebook, and that allows people who can't make it to watch it live. And then I point out too that we archive now all of our lunch talks so that if you've really enjoyed it or want to go back, you can let friends know. Some of the lunch talks have had over 1,000 views over time, and that pleases us to no end. Our lunch talks are sponsored by Friendship Village, which has been a sponsor for many years now, and I'm always pleased to introduce Mark Young, who is the marketing director for Friendship Village. And there's all sorts of surprises, new construction. Friendship Village is really growing and changing. So, Mark, you want to say good morning?
Thank you, Vic. Good morning, everybody. Hi. Yes, the technology is wonderful. We have a lot of people online that come up to me and say, gosh, I saw you online and it's terrific and the lunch talks are great, and just a lot of positive feedback from the residents there at Friendship Village. So we love being here. We love the topics. And me personally, I grew up in Mesa, so a lot of these really do.
Say Mesa.
Just east of here. And and I love coming here and learning. So thank you very much for allowing me to introduce myself. And if anybody has any questions about Friendship Village, I'll be in the back. Yes, sir.
Say something about your TV commercial.
I hear a lot about our TV commercial. Are you a positive or are you a negative? A lot of good feedback from the TV commercial. In fact, our ready list has grown about 30% since we launched that. So our ready list, which is our waiting list, it's a fancy word we use, has gone over 112 people now. So 112 people have given us $10,000 to be on this list, and we are growing fast. I think the commercial's been a really good success for us, and looking forward to adding more people to that list. So thank you very much.
And Lon, thanks for asking that question. We do run that commercial here from time to time. And for those that haven't seen it, and you should see it, the theme of it is that Friendship Village is like an ocean liner. You've got all the amenities of an ocean liner, the pool, the whatever, except you can't gamble there because for obvious reasons. So Mark, thank you very much. Mark has some materials for Friendship Village, and now the waiting list is pretty high. So they're starting now to take on the waiting list 30-year-olds. Because by the time they'll be able to move to Friendship Village, they might be the appropriate age. All right, it's great to see everybody here today for a subject that I think is critically important. One of the most egregious periods in American history was the treatment of Japanese American citizens in World War II, the paranoia of the fear of being attacked by Japan, and this misguided belief that Japanese Americans were sensitive to what was going on in Japan, and that resulted in these internment camps. It's really a shame, and we can't do anything about it now except learn from history and hope that it'll never be repeated again. But our guest today and speaker is Bill Staples Jr., who has studied this for a long time and really knows more about Japanese American baseball, I think, than anyone else, except maybe if there are any people still around that were at the camps, but I'm sure you've interviewed some of them over the years. Bill is a recognized baseball historian and author. He's a member of SABR. I don't know if you're a baseball fan. In baseball history, you probably know that. The Society for American Baseball Research in Arizona. And he has a passion for researching history and telling the untold stories of the international pastime. His areas of expertise not only include Japanese American baseball, but Negro Leagues baseball history as a context for exploring the themes of civil rights, the cross-cultural relations, and globalization. He's got a long list of credits, and we were talking before. I can take up most of the time telling you how great and smart a guy he is, but I think you'll know his level of experience and knowledge by the presentation he's about to give. So please give a warm welcome to Bill Staples, Jr.
Thank you for the introduction. No pressure there, being the number one expert. Well, I will admit right up front, I'm number two. The number one expert is Keiichiro Nakagawa, the founder of the Nisei Baseball Research Project, and I'm proud to be a board member and a partner of his in telling this important legacy. And as I mentioned to a guest earlier, this may be about the Japanese American experience, but for me it's about the timeless and shared human condition that we can all relate to, and that's why the story really touches me, and I hope it will touch you as I share going forward. All right. So I know this is Japanese American baseball, but the title for the presentation is Baseball Behind Barbed Wire. And as we alluded to earlier, we have the historical context around World War II. So there's the literal barbed wire. This also has a figurative meaning for me as well, with regards to the ongoing marginalization of the legacy of Japanese American baseball. To me, it's equally as important as the Negro League legacy, but it has yet to be respected and recognized as such. So I'm going to keep the title until Japanese Americans are recognized in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, right next to Negro Leaguers. So we will cover that. Today is November 13th. It actually happens to be the day that Kenichi Zenimura, the father of Japanese American baseball, passed away in 1968. So today we are honoring him as well, in addition to the 120,000 Japanese Americans who were incarcerated. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm a board member of the Nisei Baseball Research Project and also a board member of the Japanese American Citizens League. JCL is the second oldest civil rights organization behind the NAACP. Historically, it stood up for the rights of Japanese Americans. Now it's all Asian Americans and really anyone who is marginalized in our society. I never heard about JCL prior to 2004, and now I'm the president of the Arizona chapter. So who knows where life will take you this journey. Never heard about Kenichi Zenimura prior to 2004 as well, but now I'm the author of this book. And then an offshoot of that book is Gentle Black Giants, about a little-known history of Negro Leaguers who toured Japan in the 1920s and 30s and helped elevate the level of play in Japan to help start professional baseball in 1936. So these are wonderful stories that people need to hear more about. All right. So today's presentation will be broken down. We'll cover the background. It's usually pre-war, wartime, and post-war. We'll talk about the important legacy of Japanese Americans, and then we'll have a Q&A session as well. Goal is about 45 minutes for the presentation, 15 minutes for the Q&A, and we'll kind of break up the presentation with a short video to kind of give you a break from hearing me. You get to hear from the ball players who played themselves. All right. Okay, so let's go around the bases. Every journey in baseball begins with home plate, so that's where we begin today. So I'm going to share the story of how I first learned about this history and how I was drawn into it and why it's important to me. So I'm now 54 years old, and I was 34 years old when I learned about this story, so I've been at it for 20 years. I moved to a city just south of here, if we can say other cities' names, called Chandler. And I'm a youth baseball coach as well. And I thought it'd be really worthwhile to try to coach a team at Gila River. I heard a lot about the Gila River Indian communities and opportunities for helping. So I did a Google search for Gila River and baseball, and this is what popped up. this home plate, a handmade wooden home plate from Zenimura Field, designed by Kenichi Zenimura, Gila River Relocation Center, Arizona, 1943. Now, I thought I knew a lot about baseball. I was a historian even before that, into Negro League history, knew a lot about Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Didn't know anything about this history at all. And it fascinated me. And so I dove in, started to learn about how baseball was played at the camps across the United States during World War II. And not only that, here in Arizona, Kenichi Zenimura, here we have in his crouching stance, he had this wonderful career even before the war. He had played barnstormed with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, played with Negro Leaguers, helped organize tours back and forth across the U.S. and Japan. In my opinion, and that's what the book is all about, he is the father of Japanese American baseball. He wasn't the first. There were others who came before him. He wasn't the best. There were others who had better stats, but he is the most important in terms of the impact that he made. Also around the same time, we're in a post-9/11 world. So this story is much more than just baseball. It's about how we interact with each other and treat each other as human beings. I saw that anti-Muslim sentiment was increasing. I'm going to say his name, Balbir Singh Sodhi. 4 days after 9/11, he was killed in Mesa. And right after that, anti-Muslim sentiment skyrocketed. In addition to that, the 2004 election was very anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-LGBTQ. I saw our country was going in a direction that felt very familiar based on the history that I was learning. So I felt that future generations needed to hear this story, tried to keep it alive. My daughter and son's school started to invite me to tell the story, and from that it grew, and so that's my role in terms of connecting baseball with civil rights. Also had the opportunity to become good friends with Mas Inoshita. Mas was a senior member of the JACL community, and he was the caretaker of Zenimura's home plate. And he would make sure that Zenimura's home plate from the historic field would be safe and protected and go to important exhibits like the ones we saw with the Baseball Hall of Fame. Mas took me out to the historic Zenimura Field, so I got to be see it firsthand, took the history in. And from there, this photograph here, the gentleman crouching, his name is Tetsu Furukawa, and the young person hitting, his name is Kenichi Zenimura. And I became friends with them over the years. They would call me, they would share their stories with me. We were talking about people really knowing the story. Kenso actually joked at one point, he said, "Bill, you know more about my father than I do." This is Kenichi Zenimura's son. And Tetsu Furukawa, he was a wonderful pitcher in his day. He pitched a big game that you'll learn about here in the presentation. But he also fancied himself a poet. And from time to time, he would send me haikus related to this story. So I'm going to share some haikus with you throughout the presentation in honor of Tetsu as well. So we'll start with Tetsu's first one about Zenimura Field. And I call these Yakyu haikus. Yakyu means baseball in Japanese. So Zenimura Field, Gila River's finest pastime, many years ago. All right, so let's start with home plate and dive into pre-war. All right, so Japanese Americans had been playing baseball long before World War II. In fact, baseball was introduced to Japan in 1872, and we have documented records of people from Japan playing baseball in the U.S. in 1872. By the 1890s, it becomes an integral part of the community. There was a saying that putting on the baseball uniform was like putting on an American flag. It was how they would demonstrate their commitment to the country and their willingness to integrate and really be a part of the community. And Zenimura's story as an individual is a really good case study for the Japanese American experience. So I'll tell his story because I know it so well. He was born in Japan in 1900, moved to Hawaii in 1907. Hawaii was a multicultural baseball hotbed there. They had African American teams, Chinese, Portuguese, Japanese. So he was not only exposed to baseball, but exposed to different cultures as well. Moved to Fresno, California in 1920. He actually had plans on playing baseball in Iowa, but he got sidetracked along the way, and he fell in love and met a woman, and that usually happens with relationships in life. And then, of course, World War II, he was incarcerated here in Arizona from 1942 to 45. We know it as Gila River, but the town itself was called Rivers, and that was the name on the map as well. So Zenimura had the talent, he had the desire, but he did not have the opportunity to play baseball at the highest level. There were so many barriers against him and other Asian Americans. So I want to just go over the Asian American historical timeline of some of the things that were challenges for the Asian American community. Again, not just Japanese Americans. So the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, that banned all immigration from China. So Japanese immigrants started filling some of those roles, and then anti-Japanese sentiment started to rise out of that. 1898, with birthright citizenship was established. So if you were born in the U.S., you could be a citizen. This was a Chinese American immigrant who established that law, Wong Kim Ark. 1900, anti-Japanese sentiment starts to rise. On the West Coast, we see alien land laws preventing Japanese Americans from buying land. 1922, there's a gentleman named Ozawa who challenges the Supreme Court, who he says he wants to naturalize. He lived most of his life in California. Supreme Court said you cannot become a U.S. citizen because you were born in Asia. You can only become a U.S. citizen if you are a free white or a free slave or African American. So all of this is leading up to the 1924 Immigration Act, which basically set back all immigration law to 1890. So that basically turned back the clock, and it prevented all Asian Americans who are first generation from becoming U.S. citizens. We have the the depression and a lot of scapegoating taking place, and even acts of terrorism. There were farms that were bombed here in Arizona during the 30s, all leading up to Executive Order 9066 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So it wasn't just the events of World War I that led to the incarceration. It was all of this. The momentum was building up. So that's why I was sharing that with you. And then on the field, you can see the sentiment reflected by some ball players. A gentleman by the name of Cy Young, who was the top pitcher, and they have an award named after him. He said, "The Japanese are like the Cubans. They're too small to be big players. That's the trouble with all foreigners. Baseball will always be an American game." If only he could see Shohei Ohtani. But there are some people sitting in this room and also maybe online who are hearing this and saying, well, that was the popular opinion of 1910. Here's John McGraw. He had just returned from Japan in 1913. He says, "Mark my prediction, some star ball players will come out of Japan within the next 10 years. This is in 1914. So again, I just laid out all of the societal issues that prevented his prediction from coming true in 1924. And John McGraw wasn't the only one who saw opportunity. W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of the NAACP, he witnessed and saw firsthand that there were a lot of parallels between the Japanese American community and African Americans. And he said the fight for the Japanese for equal rights is similar to the fight the Negroes are making for their rights. Educated people of all races recognize that the color line is artificial. So we know about the color line in Major League Baseball against African Americans. For Asian Americans or even Japanese Americans, sometimes it's a color line, sometimes it was a color wall, where there are just cultural barriers and attitudes that prevented them from getting opportunities, which I'll touch on as well. So Zenimura worked through that. He tried to break down barriers through the great game of baseball. And here he is competing against the Salt Lake City Bees in 1923. He is on the, let's see, my right. Yeah, on the right, standing next to Lefty O'Doul. Lefty O'Doul is now inducted into the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame for the work that he did before and after the war in helping U.S.-Japan baseball relations. When Zenimura wasn't competing against Caucasian teams here in the U.S., he was building bridges across the Pacific. He was very proud of his Japanese heritage, but also proud to be living in America and representing American values, and he brought the American style of play to Japan as well. 1927, he has a barnstorming game with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. They have dinner the night after the game, and Babe says, "Hey, can you help me get to Japan?" And so Zenimura goes on a letter writing campaign to try to get Babe Ruth opportunities to play. And it took many years, but in 1934, Babe did eventually go. And Zenny also helped organize Negro League tours, encouraged them to go as well. So you see all this great work that he's doing as an ambassador. He's got all these connections in Japan, and he's helping these tours take place. Now, most people think that when Babe Ruth went to Japan in 1934, that that's what inspired or helped start baseball, professional baseball in 1936 in Japan. So what I want to point out is Major League stars like Babe Ruth and others only accounted for 10%, a little less than 10% of all the tours that occurred between 1905 and 1940, before the war. We can see that Japanese Americans, which is Nisei, second generation, they handled the bulk of the tours along with the Japanese teams coming to the U.S. And then a lot of university teams traveled to Japan as well. So we see the Negro Leaguers, the Major League stars, and even semi-pro. They did have some influence, but not as much as the others. So just want to point out that this really reflects the work that Zenimura and his peers did before the war in helping start professional baseball. The 1935 tour of the Tokyo Giants coming to the U.S. is very important because this was 1 year before the start of pro ball in Japan. This literally is the first professional team before it started. I want to draw attention to the middle paragraph area where it says, scouts from the Pacific Coast League are really interested in 4 players of the Tokyo Giants. A couple pitchers, Sawamura and Starfin, an outfielder named Jimmy Horio, and an infielder named Tabe. The next paragraph says, however, Horio, the center fielder, is an American citizen and the only eligible member of the Tokyo team to sign. So this is in 1935, and this is clear evidence that the Immigration Act of 1924 prevented eligible ball players from having the opportunities to come to the U.S. and play. So the first Japanese players didn't come until 1965, but we could have had Japanese ball players before the war. There was interest, there was talent, there just wasn't the opportunity. So Zenimura had his last tour back to Japan in 1937. So this is a year after pro ball had started. He was prevented from playing because all the ball players who had competed against him before thought he was a professional, but he was still a semi-pro player back in the U.S., so he was banned from playing. He had to work through it to finally get to play. This opportunity in 1937 also allowed him to reconnect with his oldest son. It was somewhat common for the eldest child to go and live with the grandparents back in the old country, if you will. So his oldest son was living in Japan, and he actually ended up serving in the Japanese military during World War II. So you have a divided family during the war. One son is fighting for Japan, and 2 sons are incarcerated here in Arizona. So very complicated times. 3 years after this, the Tokyo Olympics are being planned, but the war is beginning to escalate over in China and Japan, so they canceled the Olympics in 1940. But Zenimura was going to bring, he had scheduled or reserved 18 rooms to bring a whole group of people back for the 1940 games, because baseball was going to be an exhibition game in 1940. So that didn't happen. Instead, we have the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and then the passing of Executive Order 9066, which, the way it was written, it could have applied to Italian Americans, German Americans, and of course Japanese Americans, but they only carried it out against Japanese Americans. All right, so let's dive into the wartime story. So here's the Zenimura family. There were actually 5, but I mentioned that their oldest son, his name was Kenji, was living in Japan, and this is them in 1941. By 1943, their first year in the camp, just wanted to lay out their names and ages. So Mother Kyoko was 38. Kenichiro, which was his legal name, was 43. Kenji was living in Japan. He was 18. Kenso, they all adopted American names, by the way. Harry, Howard, and Harvey. That was their way to assimilate culturally as well. So he was 16, and then Kenshi was 15. Now, I don't speak Japanese, but I want to point out that I know some basic words, and the numbers, ichi, ni, san, shi, are 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see in the naming convention of Kenichi, Kenji, Kenso, and Kenshi, it's the first Ken, the second Ken, the third Ken, and the fourth Ken. So the joke with the family was that he was going to have 8 children, 8 sons, so he could have a baseball team of all Zenimuras. But little things like that, I learned some of the language along the way. So this is a map of all the camps across the United States, and we have the dividing line there for the exclusion area. And here in Arizona, it ran through Highway 60, separated the north and the south. If you live south of Highway 60, you and your family would be incarcerated. If you lived north of it, you weren't incarcerated. So many people moved north and tried to prevent from being evacuated or relocated. So the triangles are the 10 camps across the U.S., and the smaller dots are assembly centers where the families were sent. The conditions in those were usually horse stalls or state fairs and just really deplorable conditions. So here's the population, and these numbers are a little squishy, but it's generally about 112 to 120,000. I've seen different numbers. The most important thing for the context of this story is the percentages. 15% at Poston and almost 12% at Gila River. Poston is in northwest Arizona in Parker on the Colorado River Indian Community, and the Gila River, Rivers was at the Gila River Indian Community. So overnight, these two cities became the 3rd and 4th largest cities in Arizona during World War II, and they incarcerated over 25% of Japanese Americans during World War II. So 1 out of every 4 Japanese Americans were here in Arizona. So this is a map of Zenimura Field. So the story goes that when Zeni first arrived at Gila River, he was depressed. He had built 2 fields before. He built one in Fresno. He built another one at the Fresno Assembly Center, and they took it away from him. And he was like, great, now what do we do? We're here. So about 3 weeks, he didn't unpack his luggage, and eventually he saw another opportunity. He looked out into the field one night and he said, okay, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to build a field. So this ballpark is actually outside of the barbed wire. But camp officials saw the value of creating this community opportunity, and so they allowed them to build the field. They took down every other post of the barbed wire fence to help build the backstop. They found scrap lumber. It was basically a real makeshift activity, if you will, kind of clandestine, finding dirt in the night. Not dirt, excuse me, wood and other artifacts. Of course, we know he made the homemade wooden plate, but the bases were made of flour bags, and uniforms were made of mattress fabric as well. So, and then they were able to get the volunteer fire department to hose down the field to try to grow grass, and they ran a water line from the washing area as well. So again, very creative and a supportive community effort. And what it really did was they didn't just build a baseball field, they helped build a sense of hope and normalcy during the wartime. So again, this is the photograph of Zenimura Field. Us at the MBRP, we colorized it, but you can see the covered backstops and all the fans along the side. I think it seated somewhere around 5,000 fans who would go out there. So now another haiku break from Tets. So, a ball field best faced east to keep the harsh sun from the batter's keen eyes. So I want to revisit Zenimura Field because, again, I've been on this journey for 20 years. I've been pretty close to the game of baseball as well. But when Tets wrote this haiku, it really pointed out something interesting to me. So as a batter, you don't have the sun in your eyes because the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. I played outfield, so I always had the sun in my eyes. But think about it if you're a pitcher and you're standing on the mound. If you're a right-hander, that's the north side. And if you're a left-hander, that's the south side. You're a southpaw. So that's where the term southpaw comes from in terms of how they laid out the field. So it's pretty fascinating how baseball terminology has really worked its way into our everyday lives as well. But Tets's haiku taught me that, so just wanted to share it with you. Okay, so Zenimura Field opened on March 7th, 1943, and the camp director, Leroy Bennett, threw out the first pitch. So it was a sanctioned activity They saw the value in it, and they really got behind Zenimura Field. There was a ball player by the name of George Omachi, who was from the Fresno area as well. His quote is, "It was demeaning and humiliating to be incarcerated in your own country. Without baseball, camp life would have been miserable." George Omachi would go on to become a Major League Baseball scout. He scouted Tom Seaver of the New York Mets, and also served as a scout in the Astros organization and the Milwaukee Brewers. There was some wonderful artwork coming out of the camps. This was actually one of the signs used to promote the games. We had someone translate it. It says, "Sunday, September 26, 1943, three-year Arizona State champion, Phoenix American team versus the Butte Camp All-Stars at Block 28. So Zenimura's field was called Block 28 because that was the location in the camp. The camp was divided into two sides, the Canal side and the Butte side, and Zenimura Field was located on the Butte side. But the Phoenix American team, so Zenny had access to whatever the Arizona Republic was called then, might have been called the Republican, and he was reading about all these great teams that played on the outside. So he started writing letters and invited them to come in and play. So it wasn't just Japanese American versus Japanese Americans behind barbed wire. It was outside teams as well. And that was Zenny's way of trying to improve relations with the outside community. So this team was called the Phoenix Thunderbirds, and they were the top semi-pro team in the mid-1940s. This gentleman here, his name is Otto Wolf. Republican Gazette. You can see it on their shirts there. But the box scores were printed in both English and kanji in the camp newspaper. And the Butte team won the doubleheader 5-0 and 3-2. What's interesting about Otto Wolf, he really was an important Arizona baseball figure, but he had established himself as a really good ball player in the early 1920s after the White Sox were banned in Major League Baseball and they came through Arizona, and he played with those former players when they came here. Another team that was invited to come in was many of the players from the Arizona Compress team, Negro League team. So 1940, the champion, semi-pro champion in Arizona was the all-black team. They worked at the Arizona Compress, which is where they process cotton after it's picked. And this game occurred in October of 1943. You can see the headlines from the camp newspaper. First it says the Phoenix Color 9, they're going to come in and play in the camp. And then you see the results. The pickup squad easily defeats, it says comical Negroes. And so there's a story behind that, because what they did was, we're familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters and Negro League style of like shadow ball. So they came into the camps, winning is one thing, but lifting the spirits of those who are incarcerated behind barbed wire is another. So that's what they did. They brought a more entertaining style of play. So the end result, the 11-3 score, is less important than the impact, the positive impact it had of this community coming in, or the ball players coming in and really lifting the spirits and entertaining the Japanese Americans. Cornell Fisher, he played in this game. He is an all-star football player and baseball player from Mesa, Arizona. After World War II and when baseball was integrated here in Arizona, most African Americans went on and played softball, fast-pitch softball, and he is in the Softball Hall of Fame that's located up in Prescott. The other gentleman down here in the bottom, his name is Leon Westbrook. He would go on and play in the Professional Negro League in 1946 after playing inside the camp. So we have professional Negro Leaguers who are competing behind barbed wire. And the final comment about this game is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the only time in world history where an all-black team played an all-Japanese American team in the middle of an Indian reservation. It's probably never happened before and won't happen again. All right. So then in 1943, the U.S. government distributed something called the Loyalty Questionnaire. And this divided communities. They wanted to test the loyalty of those who were incarcerated. There were many questions on it, but there were two questions that created big problems for families. And the one is question 27. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces in the United States on combat duty wherever ordered? Now imagine if you're one of the Zenimura sons and you know that your brother is fighting over in Japan. So there are many families who would say no to this. This is the first question. The next one is, will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States and forswear any form of allegiance or obedience to Japan? Now, consider somebody like Zenimura, who's Issei, and he's been told since 1922 that he can never become a U.S. citizen. So for the Issei, for them to denounce their Japanese citizenship, there are people with no country, no citizenship. But yet, the Zenimura family, Kenichi and his sons, they said yes to both of these questions. But many people didn't. So those who said no, they were considered the no-no boys or the no-no families, and they were sent to Tule Lake. Tule Lake was a more maximum security prison camp. So September 11th, 12th of 1943, Coach Zenimura says, why don't we have a parting game or a series between the yes-yes players and the no-no players? So they do. They have the best of 3 games. So what happens is, game 1, the yes-yeses win 5-4. Game 2, the no-nos win 7-5. Game 3, they canceled it. They decided that all in all, the novel classic ended seemingly just right, being called with 1 win apiece. So with that, I'm going to pause, and we're going to hear from the ball players themselves. Sharing the story, preserving the story, it's been really rewarding. But one of the most rewarding things that I've been involved in was back in 2006, we organized a reunion between the Japanese American ball players at Gila River and the team down in Tucson. And we're going to talk about this big game that they played. It's actually one of the most thrilling chapters in the history of Butte baseball. So we'll let them tell that story, but I felt very honored to be a part of that committee or helping bring those 2 teams together. So with that, the Butte High School Eagles versus the Tucson Badgers, the game that made a difference. Actually, I already had it ready to go.
I couldn't believe what I heard on the radio. And we thought we were invincible. And I thought nobody would ever attack us. Japan wanted to reach out and grab an empire.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
They choked up. The day following Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared war on Japan. Almost overnight, the whole population's allegiance was shrouded in skepticism. Anti-Asian sentiments that had been simmering through years of racial segregation were now brought to a boil.
They hardly know anything about Japan, and I really didn't think that we were enemies of the United States.
People would say things like, good job as a dead Jap, and things like that, and you had a lot of bitter feelings, like a lot of people toward the Japanese.
We may look like Orientals, but deep inside we're American.
February of 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, initiating the removal and relocation of 120,000 Japanese from Washington through California.
That most broadly could have happened with any Americans, but it was only implemented against Japanese Americans by ethnicity, not by citizenship. If you're an Oriental, they picked you up and they took you home and told the maid to pack one suitcase.
They put the handcuffs on him and took him away, not telling us where they were taking him or why.
Basically, like we're just being herded away like sheep.
10 internment camps were constructed, many in desolate regions of the country. One such camp was built roughly an hour west of Tucson at Gila River.
You look around today, and all you'll find are rows of olive and orange trees, so it's kind of hard to imagine what it must have looked like 65 years ago when Japanese Americans were brought here and introduced to their new home. But instead of finding rows of olive trees, they instead found rows of barracks, a barren desert, and barbed wire.
I definitely felt like a prisoner.
It was a real trying time for the Japanese.
There arose a need for distractions from camp life.
We were all baseball nuts before the war. It was a real sport. We could participate in it. Came from part of the war because it gave us something to do.
One Gila resident whose passion for baseball saw no boundaries formed a competitive camp league. His name, Kenichi Zenimura.
Kenichi Zenimura was the father of Japanese American baseball. He was there to play to win.
After So his family was relocated to Gila River, Zenimura formed 3 divisions of 32 baseball teams.
We started to build this field of dream, as you might call it. Here were Americans keeping their own American pastime alive, even inside of a concentration camp.
Zenimura enjoyed a challenge, and in 1945, he and his Butte High Eagles found their match, a high school team just east of camp considered the best in Arizona, the Tucson Badgers. By 45, Tucson High was a 2-time state champ on its way to a 52-game winning streak with a pitcher named Lowell Bailey who finished 1944 with a perfect 0.00 ERA.
We have been champions a couple of years before, and we anticipated that we were going to be state champions again.
The Badgers were led by Coach Hank Slagle, a former University of Arizona Wildcat and semi-pro leaguer.
He was very conscious of his position and the influence that he created his kids.
Slagle's character would shine in mid-April when his dominant Badgers were to face a team made up of intern Japanese Americans behind barbed wire.
We knew that we were going to go up there and play in this internment camp. And maybe there was, in the back of our mind, we want to make up for Pearl Harbor.
We had heard all this hype about them and etc. And when they came to camp, they were bigger than us.
I saw the fence. And I said, God, this is like a prison. The very first or second inning, they proved themselves to be excellent. Fundamentally, that's when the doubt about who we were playing, it was all erased. We were in a ball game.
We tried to, play small ball and hit and run, steal bases.
Coach was saying, hey, you guys had better get off your duffs. These kids came here to play a ball game.
It was a back-and-forth battle that saw the Badgers take the lead 3 times, only for the Eagles to come back and tie. By the end of the ninth, the score was 10-10. The game went into extra innings.
There was some doubt that we were going to win that ball game.
In the bottom of the 10th, still tied at 10, bases loaded and 2 outs. The coach's son, Harvey Zenimura, came up to bat, hit a 3-2 pitch past the third baseman and into left field. Shosan Shimasaki took off from third base to home, the winning run. Final score, 11-10, Butte Eagles over the Tucson Badgers.
We just lost the game. It was a great moment for them. We couldn't believe it, what was happening.
It was just pandemonium there because we had beat the state champs of Arizona.
It was a game that most of us will never forget.
Perhaps even more significant than the game itself was what happened afterwards.
We took our shower, got our clothes on, and found out that we had been invited to stay.
Coach Zenimura, he thinks of everything. So he had ordered a truckload of watermelon.
After they ate, the Eagles invited the Badgers to participate in another kind of sport, sumo wrestling.
They dressed me up in all the sumo wrestling garb, and I went out there, and this kid that had played ball with us, he was grinning and laughing, and then he picked me up and stuck me. I realized that these people were Americans, just like myself.
They were sincere to us. They were like just anybody else.
The more I thought about it, the more I thought what a big mistake we made by putting these people in a relocation camp.
61 years later, with the help of the Nisei Baseball Research Project and the Pima County Sports Hall of Fame, the surviving members of both squads reunited for the first time since walking off the diamond.
It was different today. We weren't like on different sides of the team. We were one team. We are part of history. And we just went out there to play a ball game.
Coming to Tucson on this occasion, I think is one of the biggest things that ever happened to me.
I remember it for the rest of my life.
These were 2 American teams playing each other. To see the humanity between Slagle and Zenimura, that's the magical part of this.
Those kids were doing their darndest, we were doing our darndest, and to me, as I recall, it was just one of those great games.
Despite everything that was going on in our nation, divided by war, they didn't let it get in the way of playing the great game of baseball.
Both teams were winners that day. This was what baseball was meant to be.
Yeah. Great to hear their voices again. A little bit more context. After the game at Gila River, Zenimura had written a letter to Hank Slagle. They had already scheduled a rematch. So the Butte High Eagles were supposed to go to Tucson for the rematch. But word got out to the community that the Japanese Americans were coming, and government officials in Tucson cut it off in its tracks. They said, they're the enemy, they're not welcome here. Not making excuses for anyone, but just a little more historical context. On December 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor, was a Monday morning, University of Arizona campus. When students walked onto the campus, a Japanese flag was waving. Some college students had pulled a prank. They cut down the U.S. flag and raised the Japanese flag. Okay. So it wasn't Japanese Americans who did it. It was a prank, but the community was on alert. So that was one of the things to consider. But Zenimura had written a letter to Hank Slagle, and in the letter he said, I sincerely hope that we may meet once again, not as a team perhaps, but as a single member of Uncle Sam, and fight together for one principle. Hank Slagle wrote a letter back and said, I sincerely hope it won't be too long till we're all thinking straight again and can live together in a true democracy that we Americans of all races have created. So this is a baseball coach down in Tucson in 1945, very progressive, forward-thinking. I didn't know much about Hank Slagle prior to this, and I was very curious about his background and maybe his influences. So I dove in and I learned that he actually went to Phoenix Union High School in the early 1930s. He played shortstop, and his second baseman was Bill Kajikawa. Bill Kajikawa is a famous ASU coach. So I like to think that it was the early relationship between Hank Slagle and Bill Kajikawa that really even made the game between Butte High and Tucson High possible. So, so a little tip of the cap to Bill Kajikawa, a great baseball coach and football coach, and even basketball coach at ASU, and he served proudly in the 442nd Combat Regiment. So now we're in the early 1950s. Post-war, anti-Japanese American sentiment is still high. The laws changed in 1952 with the McCarran-Walter Act that allows first-generation Japanese to be U.S. citizens. Zenimura studied for his test, and he becomes a U.S. citizen in 1953. Actually, that's the largest spike of Japanese-born citizens becoming a U.S. citizen was in 1953. So all of those who were incarcerated during the war, again, it was only because of that 1924 law that prevented them from becoming citizens. But here are the Zenimura sons and their friend Ben Mitsuishi. They become the first Americans to play for the Hiroshima Carp in 1953. So that's where some of the top talent from the U.S. would go and find a place to play. We also have a ball player by the name of Fibber Hirayama. Now, Fibber didn't lie all the time. It was just a nickname. Apparently, he was born in February, and as a kid, he couldn't say February. He could only say Fibber, so that's how his nickname came about. But he was drafted by the St. Louis Browns, which was the, I believe, the Baltimore Orioles before they changed names. And he was in the minor league system for 1 year, and he said, I felt that the big leagues were closed off to us, Japanese Americans in those days. That was part of the reason why I went to Japan to play. In a way, we faced the same thing that black players went through. So very interesting, kind of a side note that I don't have in this presentation, but I just want to touch on. I interviewed many Japanese Americans who played in the Jim Crow South in the 1950s, and when they were forced to choose between white and colored, they didn't know which one to pick. When it came to public restrooms and things of that nature, they often would pick colored because that's how they identified in the U.S. system. So let's talk about the legacy of Japanese Americans. So this was some information we developed back in 2013 when the Oakland A's honored Zenimura and Japanese Americans at during spring training. Just comparing it to the Negro League history. It's a similar struggle, but with a different impact, but they're equally as important. So whereas African Americans integrated baseball, Japanese Americans helped internationalize it. And clearly we're seeing that in today's game with great players like Shohei Ohtani and all the others who are coming from Japan. They were honored again at the spring training, and our good friends Tetz Howard and Masao Iriyama, they got to throw out the first pitch at that game. So it was a really wonderful experience. Since then, 10 years later, we partnered with Major League Baseball to develop an exhibit called Baseball's Bridge Across the Pacific, celebrating the legacy of Japanese American baseball. And in Seattle in July, Mr. Otani actually got to see it, and his comment was, "I definitely feel the history of the guys who came before me, who opened the door for me and were able to, or excuse me, for me to be able to play over here." So he's tuned into the history, he understands the legacy and how it's all connected. Next year, there's a very good chance that Ichiro Suzuki will become the first Japanese-born ball player to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we're hoping that this will kind of serve like Jackie Robinson's induction. When Jackie was inducted, there were no Negro Leaguers before him celebrated, but they used that as an opportunity to look back and ask questions like, who else should be in here? We're hoping that when Ichiro gets inducted, that other Japanese Americans, Japanese Americans will be honored as well. So there's a new exhibit opening up in conjunction with Ichiro's potential induction. It's called Yakyu Baseball. And we are partnering right now, we being the Nisei Baseball Research Project. So if you get a chance to go to Cooperstown next summer, you're going to see this history that I shared as part of the larger story of U.S.-Japan baseball relations. The home plate will be there. They'll be back in Cooperstown. We're about to sign a 3-year agreement for it to be a part of that exhibit. But the other thing we're trying to work on is right now, I talked about the legacy being behind barbed wire. The way the rules are written at the Hall of Fame, Japanese Americans are not eligible even to be considered. It's historic institutional racism because they weren't allowed to play during the time and they're not allowed to be celebrated and recognized the way the rules are. Just Negro Leaguers and Major Leaguers are the only ones who could be recognized by the Hall of Fame. So we're trying to change the rule to, you can see on the very bottom, to where individuals from all historically marginalized leagues can be recognized and celebrated. Because it's not just Japanese Americans today. There could be another chapter of history that still needs to be elevated and celebrated, and so we want to change the rule to make it more inclusive for everyone. But I just want to point out, I've been talking a lot about Zenimura. Before him, there was a gentleman by the name of Steer Noda in Hawaii. He actually became one of the first representatives when Hawaii became a state. But he helped organize a lot of tours as well. And Kapi Hirata helped sign Masanori Murakami, who was the first Japanese ball player. I've also had an opportunity to travel to Japan to help raise awareness about Zenimura's impact over on the other side there. So we'll see what might happen for him over in Japan. But our exhibit continues to tour. It's going to be in Atlanta in 2025 for the All-Star Game, and then Philadelphia after that. We're able to reach about 50,000 fans who are walking by and seeing this history, but also we get a lot of media coverage as well. There's a new documentary that's coming out, or that is out right now. It's going to be primarily in schools, called Baseball Behind Barbed Wire, the same title of this presentation. It's really good documentary. It's won an award already here in Arizona, and there will be an opportunity to watch it that I'm about to share here shortly. Great film that came out in 2007 that's kind of overlooked now. It's called American Pastime. It's inspired by Zenimura's story, but it's based on Topaz, Utah camp. So if you get a chance, you can find this online and you can watch that. My book is available. I do have it here for anyone who's interested after, if you'd like to purchase it. My book is mainly, to my surprise, it's actually used in college courses. So it's not kid-friendly, but here's a good options for kid books or children's books. Baseball Saved Us, that's a classic. A Diamond in the Desert is about Chet's Furukawa's family. And Barbed Wire Baseball, that's about the Zenimura family. And I should point out that this book made the list of banned books in Florida. So buy it soon before it's not available, with my book as well. If you're looking for some fresh air learning opportunities, you can go to Nozomi Park in Chandler. We have a kiosk there that shares the history of not just Gila River, but Poston as well. And you can watch a ball game and take that in there. I should also point out that Nozomi is the Japanese word for hope. And there's only one other Nozomi Park in the world, and it's in Nagasaki. Over at the Chandler Museum, many years ago, there was a wonderful exhibit called Gammon, Enduring the Japanese American Internment at Gila River, and it is returning. So it left in 2020, it's coming back in 2025. I'm hoping to coordinate a viewing opportunity for that documentary that I talked about earlier. And of course, go out to a Cactus League game. So that's where you can see the impact and the legacy of Japanese Americans, the bridge that they built to make this even possible. And I also should point out that the face of the Japanese American community is changing as well. Dave Roberts, the coach of the Dodgers, is African American and Japanese, and he considers himself a proud Japanese American. So the Japanese American community is very diverse. So it's interesting when you watch these ball games out in Glendale or wherever, just to keep in mind that 80 years ago and less than 20, 40 miles away, some of the best baseball in Arizona was being played behind barbed wire at Zenimura Field. And when you lift up this home plate and you think about the legacy, you think about the work that they did to build that bridge across the Pacific. And I want to end with a haiku that Tetz wrote about his coach, Zeni. So, known as Coach Zeni, always with respect and love, man strict but gentle. We'll stop there.
Well, that's great. Thank you. We'll get to some questions. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, you kind of alluded to it, but how important was a baseball in the internment camps to the morale of the of the camp?
Well, like George Omachi said, it saved their lives. And Howard Zenimura, he was 16 or 17 years old at the time, and he thought that without baseball, he would have been a juvenile delinquent and really got into a lot of trouble. So like the book titles for the kids' books, Baseball Saved Us, it created a sense of normalcy and hope, and that's why that Nozomi connection with Nozomi Park and Chandler, that's really why we named that. So, yeah.
And even taking into consideration inflation, Otani has made much more money, a Japanese baseball player, than any Ty Cobb, Cy Young, all of them. That's the irony of this. And I think I did just some quick research. There have been over 20 Japanese Major League Baseball players.
A little higher.
Higher?
Yeah, 60 or 70 now.
Well, that's what I said, 60 or 70. You misunderstood me. It's just hard to imagine in a country that professes to be so diverse that this tragedy was imposed on Japanese Americans. And I should just add, as an aside, Mesa was epitomized how discriminatory this order was, because as Bill said, anyone north of the 60 could stay.
Yeah.
And as if all the bad Japanese sympathizers were south. In Mesa, 60 ran right down Main Street. So if you lived south of Main Street, you were sent to an internment camp. If you lived north of Main Street, you were okay. Yeah. And it's just really hard to imagine why it was so arbitrary.
Yeah. Hey, I do want to add, since we're talking about Mesa, they were the last team to play at Zenimura Field before it closed. It was the Mesa American Legion team. And on that team, they did have a Japanese American. His last name was Akeda, of the Akeda family in Mesa. But he couldn't go into the camps, not because he wasn't allowed, but he had to go work the family farm, so he missed that. But the other ball players who went in, one was Wizard White. He was a pretty famous football player, Danny White's father. So anyway, it continued to be diverse and welcoming and a fascinating story up to the very end.
Anyone, any questions in the couple of minutes we've got?
Early on, you mentioned there was the Japanese style of play. What was that compared to American style?
Well, the American style was a little bit more aggressive. So there's a gentleman by the name of Wally Yonamine is a really good example. So Wally is the first Japanese American to play in Japan post-war. So he brought a more aggressive, he was a football player as well. So sliding hard into second base, just, again, real, just more aggressive. They really brought that. The Japanese style was actually a lot more like the Negro League style, a little bit more of a small ball, relying more on bunting, stealing bases. So it was just a combination of that and kind of a blend and a hybrid and kind of elevated the style.
So, Bill, are there many differences between a Major League Baseball here in the United States and Japanese baseball? Any difference, rules?
You mean presently? Most of my expertise and research is really early development, but my understanding is that there are some physical differences, like the ball might be a little smaller in Japan. So pitchers, they have a little bit of a difficulty adjusting. But aside from that, we've seen the World Baseball Classic, and Japan usually does fairly well. So I think they're pretty equivalent. Some people like to say there's, we have Major League and then AAA, AA, et cetera. That professional baseball in Japan is somewhere between Major and AAA. So if there's 4A, but.
And I think baseball is more of a national sport in Japan than, say, sumo wrestling.
It is now, yes, yes.
Which is really important. Yes, sir. One more. Wait. No, you can't do that because it's streaming. Don't tell me what I can do and I can't do. This is Gary Looney, who's the treasurer of the Tempe History Society.
Bill, I know that the major Japanese stars, Ichiro and Otani, they have their own personal museums in their hometowns and their houses and stuff. And given the fact that the American Hall of Fame has all of its restrictions, what kind of celebration does Japan have for their players, such as, the individuals you're describing here?
Are you asking how
do they have like a Hall of Fame themselves?
Yeah. In Tokyo, there's the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame. I shared a photograph of me with some other executives. That's where that was. No, that wasn't Cooperstown. That was in Tokyo. And the thing that I didn't have time to really dive into is Zenimura had a close relationship with a gentleman by the name of Takizo Matsumoto. He was his cousin, actually. And the two of them worked together to organize a lot of tours. Matsumoto is inducted in the Hall of Fame over in Japan. Zenimura is not, because he was incarcerated, et cetera, all of that. Also, I was very surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, to discover that people in Japan, some of them aren't sympathetic to this story. From their perspective, they left Japan, and one person actually said, well, what do they think was going to happen when they kind of left the safety of Japan? So it's even a tough conversation over there, and Japanese Americans are not as respected as Japanese citizens. They are, and some are already inducted. I mentioned Lefty O'Doul. He was not a player, but he is inducted for his work as an ambassador. Horace Wilson, who's a school teacher, who gets credit for introducing baseball in 1872, he's inducted as well.
Everyone knows that Bill is the expert, or one of the experts on minority baseball history, which is really important here in the States. But one thing that most people don't know, and that isn't his generation, it goes back to, I think, his great-grandfather, who invented the little things that go into that attachment device, which puts pieces of paper together. I don't know who invented the stapler, but it had no practical use until his family invented those little things that go in there. So,
Exactly.
Congratulations.
And they also married into the paperclip family.
Oh, yeah.
Fastening paper and really
the Clip family,
bringing things together.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you again for coming out, and this is a topic that we could talk about forever and ever. So we have this for you, and I couldn't find anything that related to baseball history in our collection of Richard Nearing material, but I know that you live in Chandler?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, I mean, you live in Chandler.
I should also point out that I was a Tempe resident from 96 to 2000, when I attended grad school.
Okay.
I played in the Tempe softball league here, and I was the proud coach of a team called the Dharma Bums. And we had a perfect season that year. We were 0-8.
So we've got this book for you called "Those Weren't the Days:
okay.
Surviving the Arizona Territory."
Oh, thank you.
So I want
Very
to
thoughtful.
thank you again. Let's give him a big well.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, let me just you better clear your calendars, because this month and next month, we have all sorts of activities going on at the museum. One, if you haven't seen our Western exhibit and you have time after this presentation, go through it. It is really remarkable to think about what life was like in early Tempe. Not what you might imagine. We were a cattle center. Who knew? A lot of livestock came through because the railroad ran right through Tempe before it even went to Phoenix. Next month, January 8th, by the way, we don't have a lunch talks in December because we know everybody's busy for the holidays. But Mark Richwine, you might remember that name. Mark was Director of Parks and Recreation for Tempe for 131 years, and then he retired, and he'll be here to talk about Tempe's tapestry of parks. For a city that is confined as we are, we have a really good number of parks. So that's one hopefully you won't want to miss. November 16th at the Eisendrath, we're trying to find activities that we can open up the Eisendrath House for, because it really is a remarkable place. Beth Liederman Trio, featuring Diana Lee, will be performing, and there are only, it's a really intimate setting, 45 seats or so, and there are just a few tickets left, and they're really inexpensive. They are $15. And there will be refreshments. Also want to talk to you about Tree of Lights. That will be a celebration that we hold on December 1st. Gary is out in the lobby there with ornaments that you can purchase now to put on your tree or on our Tree of Lights. So be sure and talk to Gary as you go. And also to Mark, way in the back, about Friendship Village. And on December 1st also is a national program called Museum Store Sunday. There will be all sorts of special sale items and things of that sort in the gift shop. So you can come for Tree of Lights and also observe our gift store Sunday. And then the Peterson House is open the first 3 weekends in December, Saturday and Sunday. That is a time for you to go through the Peterson House. There are exhibitors on the property. It really, if you've never been to the Peterson House or been there during the holidays, it's all decorated for the holidays. And then, help me out, December, the evening. Oh, the December 11th, there is night at the, thank you, I need an assistant. Do you want to hold this for me? Wednesday, December 11th from 5:30 to 8 is an evening of light refreshments, harp music, self-guided historic tours, and all sorts of other activities. And because it's the museum, it's free. That's why we want you to become a member. Memberships are very inexpensive, and they help us do all the things that we're able to do in support of the museum. I think that covers it all, does it? And I want to recognize Brianna, who has become our guru of technology. When you look at this online, you'll see how she's able to coordinate all of these things. So in the meantime, I would like to wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving holiday, and looking far ahead to Christmas and Hanukkah and the other holidays that are celebrated in December, and we will see all of you back in January. Thank you very much.
If anyone